The Empire's invasion force might be defeated, but the real threat is just revealing itself. The Emperor's inner circle, the single digits, are moving in the shadows. And my friend Masayuki is their next target. AI Anime and Manga presents. Welcome back. Before we begin the intelligence meeting, please take a second to like, comment, and subscribe. A huge thank you to our Patreon members. Your support covers the AI generation, subtitles, and rendering, and members get early access to episodes before they go public. Now, let's uncover the Empire's secrets. Time for my other objective, intel gathering. I thought we needed to go into some depth today, so I took a few of Caligulio's staffers familiar with Imperial matters and asked them to join me in one of our conference halls. I wanted to hold a meeting with them and the members of my cabinet who were still awake so we could talk about what we'd do with the Empire next. At this point, the Empire was presumably still unaware that Caligulio's force was defeated. Yuuki might have received reports from Misha and Laplace, but worrying about leaks from them seemed unwarranted to me. Besides, we were already aware of the Empire's current maneuvers. I had told Luminous about the 300 airships traveling over the sea toward Lubelius. Luminous had answered with her usual confidence.
Watch me turn the tables on them all.
I doubted Luminous herself would take action, but we had a treaty, and she'd promised to guard against the Imperial forces coming from the north. The Holy Empire of Lubelius, as the world's religious headquarters, churns out a ton of paladins, and apparently they had their own standing force as well. Between that and the hidden threat that was the vampires, I felt fine leaving things in their hands. If Luminous got in any danger, the 150,000-strong Western deployment could step up too. Testarossa had them standing by, ready to respond at a moment's notice. Most of all, though, Hinata was part of the team intercepting the airships. They were truly prepared for anything, but we still couldn't let our guard down. I looked at my assembled group and announced the start of the meeting. Seated in the hall were my secretaries, Shion and Diablo, Benimaru, my supreme general, Rigurd and Kaijin, my assistants in political affairs, Geibiru and Gobta, my two core leaders, Hakuro, my advisor, Soei, my intelligence officer, and Gadora, too, as a material witness of sorts. The three demonesses, Testarossa, Ultima, and Carrera, were there as well. On the Imperial side, there were Caligulio himself, Minitz, Bernie, and Jiwu. Including myself, we had 18 people in the room. We started with introductions, and of course the Imperials were utterly stunned when they found out the three demonesses were all Primals. Man, were those stares painful to endure. Sorry guys, it's Diablo's fault, not mine. I could already anticipate the complaints coming my way, so I decided to pretend nothing happened and get down to business. I opened gently. So if there's stuff you can't share with me, that's cool, okay? Just tell me whatever you can. With that, I used Argos, the Eye of God, to put up a display showing the airship squadron in flight. Caligulio would be explaining the current state of the Empire to us as we agreed upon beforehand. The Imperials looked pretty upset about the video on the large surveillance screen, but Caligulio kept his composure and promptly began his briefing. I already knew a bit about the situation over there from Gadora. That old man didn't seem to care at all about betraying the Empire, but Caligulio was a soldier. There might be some things he couldn't talk about, and we just have to follow up on that later. I told him what I knew in advance, so I'd be having him provide his briefing based on that. Caligulio began briskly. Very well. In that case, I will begin. He was even more brisk and businesslike than I anticipated. The armored division that Caligulio led had a department called the Flying Combat Corps, which boasted 400 state-of-the-art airships. 300 of them were flying to northern Inglacia, carrying full troop loads. Each one could carry up to 400 people, and a crew of 50 was enough to fly one, so that meant a maximum of 350 passengers. All this was just as Gadora explained to me. These ships were transporting the Magical Beast Division led by one General Gradim, a force of 30,000 in all. However, it was actually more like 60,000, since each division member was partnered with a magical beast of their own. They were also joined by support personnel providing logistical services. They had a major general named Zamdo commanding them, but they were probably non-combatants who shouldn't be counted in military numbers. Caligulio looked ashamed as he continued. It is a tad embarrassing to talk about this here, but most of the troops sent to Inglacia are still novices. They can operate an airship just fine, but in an actual combat situation, their performance is likely going to suffer. Normally, they would be conducting research and development for us, so I hope you can show them some mercy. As Caligulio explained, the Empire had deployed all its war power to Tempest, so he gave his rival Gradim nothing but non-combatant personnel. The support staff numbered around 30,000 in all, but there were hardly wizards or the like. Most were sorcerers, a level below. Beyond that, the rest were airship operators and maintenance techs, and Caligulio asked me to take them prisoner instead of killing them if possible. Shion was enraged.
Of all the brazen things to say, you invaded another country, and now that it looks like you'll lose, you want us to save them without killing anyone?
It made Caligulio turn pale as he apologized. I tried to quiet her down a bit, but really, I thought she was right. Caligulio understood that well enough too, which explained why he was so apologetic about it. But, well, what happens over there isn't in our jurisdiction. Depending on how things go, I might have to disappoint you there. Caligulio accepted that. Yes, I understand that, of course. Please do as you wish, Lord Rimuru. I'd consider his request if I thought it was possible, but I couldn't make any promises. My resurrection magic isn't a cure-all. Sometimes it doesn't work if the conditions aren't right, and depending on how Luminous reacted to this, I might not be in any position to intervene anyway. I had heard that Gradim's magical beast division was a pretty considerable threat, and there was no guarantee that they wouldn't deal serious damage to Hinata and her troops. If that happened, there wouldn't be any time for mercy. We've got a ton of defensive capability, so I didn't think we'd ever be defeated. But there are never any absolutes in war, so I couldn't make guarantees like that lightly. So that was the end of that. Now we had to talk about Dwargon's eastern city. I switched the Eye of God over to a shot of an army some 60,000 strong. They were deployed and looking pretty relaxed, no tension in the air whatsoever. The Imperial officers were shocked all over again, but I pressed on with my briefing. At present, Yuuki and I have somewhat reluctantly joined together in an alliance. This might look like a tense standoff, but it's actually just kind of a big performance. Minitz snorted at this. Well, look at that. If part of our army was compromised from the start, we had practically no chance of winning, did we? Caligulio nodded. Yeah, and the moment my armored division and Gradim's magical beast division are wiped out, they'll turn their claws toward the Imperial capital and then checkmate, eh? They exchanged embittered looks. Now they knew they were defeated both in strength and in strategy. But not everyone was on the same page. Bernie answered in a soldier's voice. I don't think so. The Emperor still has people in the capital who'll protect him. I know I've said this many times before, but an awakened soldier is a literal one-man army. I'm sure they would have foreseen the possibility that Yuuki would rebel against them. It was kinda weird hearing Bernie talk like this. My image of him as Masayuki's long-suffering flunky was still too strong in my mind. This seemed like someone totally different. I asked Bernie on reflex, "Is this the real you I'm seeing here, Bernie?" Bernie answered honestly, No, the real me is more how I was when I was traveling with Masayuki. So his current attitude was him in military mode, but he was usually a lot more informal, huh? He also informed me that he's originally from the United States and is 45 years old. He was originally an average student like any other, so the Bernie I saw before me was all the result of his education in this world. That much probably doesn't matter to anyone besides himself, although it did make me feel a little affinity for him. I admitted Bernie was probably right. But you're probably right. I heard that there's someone in the Empire who could potentially kill me. And it's totally expected that a cornered mouse can find a way to turn the tables on the cat. The quality over quantity dynamic in this world was tough to wrap your head around. No matter how big an army you assembled, they could still be defeated by one single person if they were unlucky. That's how we won too, so we needed to consider being in the opposite position as well. Shion's hand was already on her giant sword.
In that case, why don't I travel over there and show this someone a thing or two?
We had zero guarantee that she could win, so I had to turn down that request. Diablo tried to volunteer next.
In that case, allow me to.
I cut him off at once. Denied. I didn't even want to imagine a scenario where Diablo lost, but still, no. My policy here was to wait and see until we could create a situation where we were totally sure we could win. That much, as I reminded everyone in the room I wanted to be thorough with. Intelligence was really the most important thing though, wasn't it? I couldn't even count the number of failures we'd had because of lack of information. We had to keep our ears open right now so we didn't fall into the same trap again. I turned to Bernie and Jiwu. So you guys were sticking with Masayuki because it let you get close to me without attracting suspicion, right? Honestly, I had no idea at all. And the timing of that attack was incredibly dangerous for me. They might have been acting on Damrada's orders, but it really was a perfect strategy, one not even Raphael picked up on. I had to applaud them for that, enemy or not. I'm sure they had opportunities to target me before then, but it couldn't have been easy for them to keep their maximum fighting skills under wraps until that one critical moment. We had the upper hand this time, maybe, but things could have easily gone the other way and the Emperor would have gotten exactly what he wanted. Tempest without Benimaru and me would have fallen into total disarray and the Empire would have instantly overrun it. Benimaru took the lesson personally.
My pride got the best of me there. I was laboring under the assumption that the labyrinth is always safe. I need to remember that during war there is always another danger to consider.
So I followed him.
Me as well. I will be sure to more thoroughly vet anyone who gets close to Sir Rimuru.
Benimaru and Soei must have been hung up about that, but I couldn't pin this on them alone. They had always been way more vigilant than I ever was, anticipating every potential eventuality. I just didn't have my ears up for danger at all, and that was something I needed to improve on. Bernie explained his original assignment. Sir Damrada was the one who ordered us to protect Masayuki. He never told me what for, and I don't think that order could have leaked out anywhere. Jiwu added her side. Me neither. We didn't receive our orders at the same time. It was through different channels so we wouldn't know each other's real identities. I didn't know Bernie was a single digit until the assassination order came for you, Lord Rimuru. Now Bernie and Jiwu were a full part of the conversation. I made it clear they had a right to remain silent, so I appreciated their willingness to talk for me. But something about these statements bothered me. I asked them to clarify. Do you mean you didn't know? Or that you didn't remember until just then? Bernie answered first. No, I've never met another single digit besides myself. I only learned Jiwu was one as well when I got that order. Jiwu confirmed it. Same here. I don't think any of them know each other's true identity except for the commander and vice commander. That was a surprise. The Empire's best forces didn't even know each other at all. Why were they leaving them in the dark like that? Raphael answered in my mind.
Understood. Presumably it is for the purpose of preventing treachery.
If they didn't know each other's identities, they couldn't conspire to overthrow their bosses. That was just beyond thorough. It showed how careful they were to protect the Emperor's safety, I guess. I gave my honest reaction. I can understand that, I suppose, but it strikes me as pretty wasteful and inefficient. If you two were acquainted, you could have been working together against me from the very beginning. Gadora chuckled before answering. Sir Rimuru, may I speak frankly and with the utmost of respect for you? Sure, of course. Anything's welcome. Gadora went on. Very well. If I may, Sir Rimuru, you possess a great deal of intelligence, but I fear that you are not very careful at times. I know this man Damrada very well, and I'll inform you that he's a cunning fellow. He doesn't even trust his own subordinates, and for him, caution is his lifelong mantra. Sounds like Raphael was right. They arranged it that way to prevent any conspiracies. I knew Damrada was one of the 3 leaders of Cerberus and a man who trusted money and nothing else. But I guess he was that way with everything in his life, huh? And he was one of the highest-ranking single digits as well? I pressed the point. I've never met him before, but he sounds like a pretty bad guy. Given his approach to killing Gadora, I figured he had to be a single digit. And if he was in a position to give orders to you two, Bernie and Jiwu, does that mean Damrada's the head of the group? Gadora's answer was immediate. No, Damrada is likely the vice commander. I am all but certain the commander is Tatsuya Kondo, right? The director of the Imperial Intelligence Bureau and one of the people Gadora had his eye on. Gadora said he didn't know him very well, but despite the lack of information, he seemed fairly certain about that based on Damrada's true identity. Having all this exposed left the Imperials in the room despondent. Bernie and Jiwu were giving me all sorts of useful info. They must have figured there was no point hiding it any longer. They said Gadora was right. Damrada was the vice commander of the Imperial Guardians, ranked number 2 in the whole Empire. We weren't sure if Kondo was the leader yet, but there was no doubting that Damrada was still way up there in the hierarchy. Good job, Gadora, I thought as I listened to them. Bernie revealed something else. And to tell the truth, the attack on Lord Rimuru wasn't a command from Sir Damrada, but actually a secret order from Commander Kondo. Jiwu confirmed it. It was for me too. It was weird, I thought, because it overrode our orders to guard Masayuki. Jiwu explained to me that she had prepared a backstory for herself where her home village was rescued by Masayuki. That way he'd instantly trust her, and then she'd be repaying the favor by guarding him. I asked the obvious question. Well, if you were going to blow your covers at the same time, wouldn't it have been better to work together from the start? After a pause, Bernie agreed. I agree with you, yes. I believe he was using Masayuki to keep from arousing your suspicion, because it certainly was the perfect opportunity to kill you. Looking back on it, Bernie realized that he had some questions about the whole thing. Assuming there were no lies in their tale, and considering the overall situation, it might have been that Damrada and the commander had different objectives. Damrada organized this entire undercover operation. It'd be odd for him to order its total abandonment. Maybe it was a sacrifice made to improve their chances of success. But even so, I was sure there could have been another way. I thought it was natural for Bernie and Jiwu to wonder about that, and to suspect some underlying reason for it. By the way, have any of you Empire guys ever seen Emperor Ludora's face? The question suddenly occurred to me, so I asked it. Only Gadora raised his hand. Benimaru sounded pretty surprised.
You're kidding me. You don't know what the man you serve looks like.
Kaijin offered his own take. Well, boss, you don't act much like any other ruler. You're social enough to go eating and drinking around town, and you're always willing to chat with anyone who wants to. That's just weird, I protested. Oh, come on. Kaijin didn't mean it as an insult. Hey, no disrespect intended. King Gazel has that side to him too, although he's a bit stricter with his behavior than you. But you know, royals and nobles kinda like a little more prestige in their lives, right? And I think a good number of them prefer keeping their faces away from the little folk. I could only mutter, Rigurd weighed in.
What Sir Kaijin said makes sense to me, but I'm still not sure I really understand it. That is to say, hiding your face from the people who're supposed to be guarding you even, isn't that a little too excessive?
Kaijin agreed. Well, yeah, even I thought that was going way too far. Gobta scratched his head. It is weird, innit? Hakuro corrected him.
Not weird so much as abnormal. Bernie, was it? May I ask you a question?
Bernie answered Hakuro. What do you want to know? Hakuro's sharp gaze settled on him.
Why is it that the Emperor's own guardians don't even know what he looks like? How are you meant to guard him then?
Being exposed to that sharp gaze of Hakuro's made Bernie sit back up, attempting to rally himself. Well, it's simple. Only people ranked 6th or greater have seen His Majesty in person. Our commander and vice commander are often out on other business, but the remaining 4 accompany our emperor at all times. The members of this quartet were apparently referred to as the 4 Knights, and all of them were so formidable that, as far as Bernie and Jiwu knew, none of them had been replaced in many, many years. Hakuro certainly wasn't shying away from the tough questions.
So the 2 of you weren't quite as trusted as those 4 then? Are you inferior to these 4 knights in ability as well?
It seemed to frustrate Bernie a little. You could take it that way, yes. Trying to defeat any of those 4 would be an uphill battle for me. Plus, His Majesty is also attended to by the juggernaut we discussed before, the fearsome Imperial Marshal, someone I'd never have a chance against. In fact, I'm not sure the rest of the single digits together could even score a victory against this menace. There's that so-called juggernaut again. So far we knew about Kondo, Damrada, the 4 Knights, and this Marshal figure, huh? That made 7, and if you added Bernie and Jiwu to that, you had 9 people, 1 for each single digit, so to speak. But hang on, if the cutoff for access to the Emperor was single digit number 6, then the Marshal must not be a ranked member technically. That meant there was still 1 more unknown single digit out there. In other words, 8 people I better stay on my guard for in all. And if Kondo wasn't actually the commander, that'd be 1 more figure to add to the mix. Worrying indeed. Learning about that was good and all, but I wanted to ascertain something else first. You know, I heard from Gadora that Masayuki and Emperor Ludora look exactly alike. Gadora nodded. The rest of the meeting hall considered this for a few moments. I laid out the problem. And Damrada ordered you to protect Masayuki, right? And he arranged things so that both of you would be in the dark about each other and nobody would suspect anything. But after all that trouble, you received an order that abandoned the entire setup. Is it me, or are Damrada and the single-digit commander working against each other here? I was pretty sure about this by now, so I went ahead and said it out loud. If I had to guess, it seemed likely Damrada really was trying to keep Masayuki safe. Why? I don't know, but the fact that he and the Emperor were spitting images of each other must have something to do with it. I checked the logic with Bernie and Jiwu. But you said you were using Masayuki, right? Bernie answered. Right. I had no idea why we were asked to protect him, keep in mind. That's why I didn't question the commander's order at all. Jiwu added, Me neither. Sir Damrada never explained his reasoning at all. They were using Masayuki to get closer to me. If Damrada ordered them to do so, it would have made sense, but then the commander had to stick their neck in. This brought up another question I had to ask. So do you think the commander's aware of Masayuki's resemblance to the Emperor? Gadora answered carefully. That's a good question. But if the commander is Kondo, as I believe he is, then he most certainly would have known. Caligulio added what he could. We do know this man Kondo, although I can't surmise what his situation was at the time. The stories say he's a very sly man who has an iron grip on all the intelligence the Empire has. Minitz was less evasive. Yes, in his capacity as head of the IIB, he's been called a mysterious figure stalking the halls of information. The IIB and military have never been on very friendly terms with each other, and I had a hard time dealing with him too. We had tried launching hostilities against him several times, but they all ended in failure. That alone is proof that he's far from ordinary. Funny how Caligulio was trying to fudge the details only to have Minitz reveal everything anyway. It was clear that to the Imperial military, Kondo was seen as a wild card and a threat. And if he could get the better of someone as talented as Minitz, he was a force to be reckoned with. Gadora gave his own verdict. I could certainly never beat him anyway. Old man Gadora, despite appearances, was no slouch in battle. By my estimation, he might rank up there with a saint in strength. His magicule count wasn't all that high, but he more than made up for it with his casting skills. If someone like him claimed he couldn't win, then Kondo must be at least saint level, a titan up there with Hinata or King Gazel. Besides, Bernie and Jiwu were saints as well, and Caligulio went and got himself awakened. Without an ultimate skill to call his own, Gadora probably couldn't have beaten any of them, so now I knew that Kondo was a danger in a fight and a master of spycraft. And he must have known about Masayuki, I imagined. I thought out loud. But if Kondo was aware of Masayuki, perhaps he had different intentions from Damrada, huh? Bernie and Jiwu's attack was so massive, it's clear they didn't really care if Masayuki lived or died. That's totally at odds with Damrada's order. Bernie had a bit of trouble picking his words. Well, after a moment, he admitted the truth. To tell the truth, what the commander told us exactly was to get rid of Masayuki as well, since he'd no longer be useful. Such were their orders, but after traveling together and building something of an attachment, they were both hesitant to just kill the guy. Hence, they decided to put off discussing his fate until they were finished with me. If they could hide him somewhere, then perfect. If not, the idea they had was to magically erase his memories instead. Anyway, it was all crystal clear to me now, so we know that something's definitely up with Masayuki. I know he's not gonna like this, but I think he'll need to be kept under guard for a little while. Can I have you handle that, Soei?
Yes, sir.
Right. I knew I could count on him. Let's assume that Damrada and the commander have different agendas then. One of them wants to protect Masayuki, the other one wants him dead. We don't know why yet, of course, but clearly there's a conflict here. Gadora saw the strategic opening, yes. And if we can find a way to take advantage of this, it could be a great windfall for us. I wasn't ready to be that optimistic. I don't think it'll be that easy. But the fact that our enemy isn't a monolith is itself good news. You think so? I guess. If you're having trouble distinguishing friend from foe, then you have to assume everybody's a foe. But let's get some more information before we decide on matters.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.